Hey YouTube, Kiritwig here, bringing you all an update to my Spellbook Prophecy Yu-Gi-Oh! Deck profile for post the October 2022 ban list. I've always been a fan of the Spellbook deck. It's probably one of the oldest decks I have since I got back into playing Yu-Gi-Oh! This deck focuses on using some of the Spellbook lineup to make the spellcasters we have in this deck, who are the Prophecy monsters, all the more powerful. And one of the most broken cards in the deck was Spellbook of Judgment. That's why this card has been on the ban list for quite some time now. It just gave you search power, special summon power, you name it, and the fact that we got it back at 1 for the October ban list makes it a very useful card in the deck, just as a powerhouse and setup card. And what's so great about it is it's very searchable in the deck as well. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with the deck profile. So for the main deck monsters, I'm running 3 High Priestess of Prophecy. Now some people like to go for more of the shutdown method in the deck, just locking down the playstyle with Jowgen. I do like running High Priestess though. It's an answer to some bigger boss monsters in the deck. You can just special summon it out onto the field by revealing 3 Spellbook spells in your hand and then summon this card. And once per turn, you can banish 1 Spellbook spell from your hand or graveyard to target 1 card in the field and destroy that target. So it's a card that can destroy. It's something that can be powered up thanks to your other Spellbook cards. Just a good card to rely on for a boss monster to get out onto the field. If you have multiple High Priestess in your hand, you can just special summon both out onto the field and then have those resources to go for. I also run 3 Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. I'd say one of the more important searchers in the deck. If it's normal summon or flip face up, you add 1 Spellbook spell from your deck to your hand. So with this card, you're able to add your very important spell, which is the Spellbook of Judgment, just right to your hand, thanks to this card, and then utilize your Spellbook of Judgment for more and more search power because of it. So 3 Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, just so you have those search options for you. And then I also run 3 copies of Jowgen the Spiritualist. With this card, you can discard 1 random card from your hand to the graveyard to destroy all special summon monsters on the field, and neither player can special summon monsters. So not only can you clear out your opponent's board of special summon monsters, but you can also then just restrict them from being able to special summon at all. And what's great is this card can be special summoned still. It's not like, limited for special summoning, so you can special summon Jowgen out onto the field. So you can just use a Spellbook of Judgment to special summon Jowgen out onto the field. And then by the end of the turn, after you've done all of your own special summoning, let's say revealing and special summoning High Priestess onto the field, you can then just special summon Jowgen and then have it so your opponent can't special summon, or at least have to swing into Jowgen on the field, which you'll want to special summon in defense to get around this. And then the last monster that I run in the main deck is just 3 Effect Veiler. It's my hand trap of choice because this is a spellcaster deck, so having a hand trap that you can also utilize with some of the other cards we've run in this deck definitely does pop up more than often. So being able to use this card that's also not once per turn for a hand trap, but still usable in the Spellbook deck definitely does help. And that is it for the main deck monsters. We'll now move on to the spells. Right, fresh off the ban list is Spellbook of Judgment. This is a quick play spell. During the end phase of the turn this card was activated, add Spellbook spell cards from your deck to your hand, except for Spellbook of Judgment, up to the number of spell cards activated after this card's resolution. Then you can special summon from your deck 1 spellcaster monster whose level is less than or equal to the number of cards added to your hand by this effect. And you can activate 1 Spellbook of Judgment per turn. This card is insane in this deck. It just gives you so much search power, hand consistency for the investment you would use for the cards in your hand, but also just being able to special summon a monster out into the field. You could potentially summon High Priestess if you did go through 7 spells this turn, or even if you were to go up against an opponent who special summons a lot and uses a lot of spell cards in their deck. This card just gives you that option because it is a quick play spell, so you can activate on your opponent's turn and even just shut them down from using their own spells, because then they'd have to risk you getting out a bigger monster at the end of all that onto your own field. And I also run 3 Spellbook of Secrets for the search power. You add 1 Spellbook card from your deck to your hand, except for Spellbook of Secrets. You can only activate 1 Spellbook of Secrets per turn. So you can search off the card I just spoke of before. That's what's great about Spellbook of Judgment, that even though this card is at 1, it is heavily searchable in the deck. So 3 Spellbook of Secrets, which can also be searched off of Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. Being able to add a Spellbook card to your hand off of this card works vice versa with this search power. And And I also run 3 Spellbook of Knowledge. This card actually has not seen any play with Spellbook of Judgment since this card came out, because of the fact that this card was banned before Spellbook of Knowledge came out in the Code of the Duelist set. So it's very awesome to see these two cards together, because one, we have more draw power thanks to it, and just another engine card to use with all the other spells, being able to send a spellcaster we control or one other spellbook card from our hand or face on the field, except for Spellbook of Knowledge, to the graveyard to draw 2 cards. It's great for that draw power, but also just setting up more and more of the spells that we run in this deck. That's what's so scary about it. This will be the first time, like I said, running Spellbook of Judgment and Spellbook of Knowledge in the same deck together. And for one of the more powerhouse cards to get rid of opponents' resources, I also run 3 copies of Spellbook of Fate. If you control a spellcaster type monster, you can banish up to 3 spellbook cards from your graveyard. Apply this effect depending on the number of spell cards banished for this card's activation. You can only activate 1 Spellbook of Fate per turn. If you banish 1, you return 1 set spell trap on the field to the hand. If it's 2, change 1 monster on the field to face down defense position. Or 3, banish 1 card your opponent controls. It doesn't target either. That's what's so scary about this card. But also just being able to use the other effects, like flipping your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy face down at the end of the turn. If your opponent didn't give you an option for you to banish one of their cards, you can at least flip Spellbook Magician back at the end of the next turn, and then flip it back face up again to get another search. And for some of the lower numbers for these Spellbook cards, I also run 2 copies of the Grand Spellbook Tower. Once per turn during your standby phase, if you have a spellcaster type monster on your side of the field or in your graveyard, you can place 1 Spellbook spell card from your graveyard on the bottom of your deck, except for the Grand Spellbook Tower, then draw 1 card. And when this card in your possession is destroyed by an opponent's card and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon 1 spellcaster type monster from your hand or deck whose level is less than or equal to the number of Spellbook cards in your graveyard. So you have special summon power, but this card is mostly used so you're basically drawing 2 cards during your draw phase, and also being able to recycle your spellbooks back. You really don't want to banish Spellbook of Judgment unless you have a means to add it back to your hand with some of the other cards in your deck. So as long as you have those resources, you can always just, add Spellbook of Judgment back into your deck again, and then just search it out with other cards to reuse. You should be able to at least go through the notion of searching and getting that card to your hand to reuse to utilize the draw power, because then you should just be able to draw into other cards that could at least be able to help search it back out again. And I also run 2 Spellbook of the Master. This is for copying the effects of your spellbook cards in your graveyard if you control a spellcaster type monster, by revealing 1 other spellbook card in your hand and then targeting that Spellbook normal spell in your graveyard to copy that effect. So this is just so you can also increase the spell count in your graveyard, but also increase the number of spells you activate that turn for Spellbook of Judgment. I also run 2 Spellbook of Eternity, so you have a way to get back your banished spellbook cards back into your hand. Even being able to activate this card and then copy it with Spellbook of the Master is one way you can do that, or using Spellbook of the Master to copy Spellbook of Secrets and gain another search. And I also run 2 Spellbook Library of Crescent. I really like this card early on in the game because then you have the search power, being able to add a Spellbook of Secrets to your hand, or just revealing 3 different ones and getting the potential search if you have another one, just by revealing 3 Spellbook spell cards with different names. If you didn't want to run Spellbook Library of the Crescent, you can always put in Spellbook Star Hall. This card gets spell counters and increases the attack of your spellcaster type monsters, meaning you can keep Jowgen safe by just increasing his attack on the field to begin with. And then for some of the one-ofs that I run for the Spellbook spells, I run 1 Spellbook of Power. You can use this just to boost up the attack of your spellcaster type monsters on the field, and when it destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can add 1 Spellbook spell card from your deck to your hand. So an emergency situation can once again be a way to add Spellbook of Judgment in your hand. If you didn't have a way to search before, if your opponent Ash Blossomed your search, you can at least use the effect of Spellbook of Power to gain that search. Also 1 Spellbook of Wisdom to protect our spellcasters on the field by spell or trap effects, and 1 Spellbook of Life to be able to special summon our spellcasters back by banishing a spellcaster type monster from our graveyard and revealing a Spellbook spell card in our hand to target 1 in the graveyard, and then equip it on to that monster that you special summon and increase its level by the level of the monster that was banished. But still, it's just a monster reborn for those cards. That's it for the Spellbook lineup. You do run a pretty high Spellbook lineup in this deck, but they all work so well together to build up the graveyard, so you want that high number count. For the non-Spellbook cards that we run in the deck, I run 1 Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Now, along with the Grand Spellbook Tower, just having another field spell search gives you 1 that can shut down your opponent's spells. If your opponent can't activate spells and they can't special summon monsters thanks to Jowgen, there's really not much they can do in this deck. So along with the Grand Spellbook Tower, having your draw power, having Secret Village of the Spellcasters just is something much more needed for a lockdown of your opponent. I also run 1 Call by the Grave to stop any of their graveyard plays, 1 Monster Reborn to get one of those resources from your graveyard back onto your field, since you're not limited to how you can special summon High Priestess back onto the field also. And one of my texts for the 1-ofs, I run 1 Power of the Guardians. I really do like this card because you can equip it onto Jowgen the Spiritualist and then just protect it. If your opponent doesn't have a back row removal, you can then just keep building up the counters because your opponent will have to attack into Jowgen, getting that counter, and before it would be destroyed by battle, you can get rid of the counter off of Power of the Guardians to protect this card on the field, putting it in defense so you won't take any damage, and then you can just sit on that until you get some of the other cards you may need to defeat your opponent also. And for more of the draw power in the deck, I run 2 Pot of Desires. Now this you don't want to activate so early on. With this deck, you should at least be able to have some search in your hand. So activating is plenty of the spellbook searches to use in your hand to get the important 1-ofs that you run in the deck before you activate this card. Because then you're just going for a draw 2 of some of the other cards. And some of the ones you won't mind banishing, we are running 3 of. So very, difficult chance that you'll banish all 3 of one of the particular spellcaster monsters we run in the deck. That's why I like running Pot of Desires, but once again, you want to get around the banish until you have some of the important cards in your hand added to use. And then lastly for the spells, just 1 Terraforming. You can search out the Grand Spellbook Tower with this or go for the Secret Village of the Spellcasters. It's a good search, just having both of those options available to you thanks to this card. And that is it for the main deck. We'll now move on to the extra deck. I run 2 copies of Crowley, the first Prophesier. You need 2 spellcaster monsters to make this card. If it's link summoned, you can reveal 3 spellbook cards with different names from your deck, and your opponent randomly picks one for you to add to your hand. Shuffle the rest of the deck. You can only use this effect of Crowley, the first Prophesier, once per turn. In each turn, a level 5 or higher spellcaster monster you normal summon can be summoned without tributing. So if you get Crowley out onto the field and have your Jowgen set up as well, then you really don't have to worry about special summoning, because then you can just normal summon your High Priestess out onto the field without the tribute play. You can always have the tribute play thanks to High Priestess beforehand, but the big plays come down to just being able to have those resources for all your setup and special summon. And a lot of that can come down to Spellbook of the Judgment, just giving you that extra resource for your spellcaster type monster, whether it be at the end of your opponent's turn or just for that setup to begin with at the end of your turn. And I also run for some more of the generic link monsters. 1 Artemis, the Magistus Moon Maiden, for a link play. If your opponent does, let's say, negate the effect of Jowgen with one of their own cards, you can at least then go into Artemis and then special summon Jowgen back onto the field with some of our other cards. 1 Barricade Board Blocker for the field spell Recycle. 1 Area the Water Charmer and 1 Lena the Light Charmer for more spellcaster link 2 options and also ways to take our opponent's own monsters. 1 Nightmare Phoenix, and then for the higher link monsters, I run 1 Nightmare Unicorn and 1 Selene, Queen, the Master of Magicians, especially with Selene's counters that you can use with all the different spells we run in this deck, to then go into our bigger monsters, which are Apollosa and Access Code Talker, just to have more of a link 4 boss monster to use against your opponents. And I also run 1 number 11 Big Eye for the Xyz monsters to High Priestess to be able to overlay into this resource to take your opponent's cards, and being a spellcaster can be used with many of the spells we run this deck to begin with. I also run 1 Phantom Knight's Curse Javelin and 1 Herald of Pure Light for resource power and recycling with Herald of Pure Light and Curse Javelin to get over some of my opponent's monsters, and then being able to overlay into Downward Magician, having us another spellcaster type monster. I don't run Zeus. If you want to run Zeus, you could take out one of the Herald of Pure Light or the Phantom Knight to then use to go into Downward Magician and then that monster. But what's great about Downward Magician is you can at least have another spellcaster resource with this card alone in the deck. As for some of the go-to plays for your setup, a lot of it can be just searched out for the Spellbook of Judgment. If you have, let's say, Spellbook of Secrets in your hand, and then just one of the additional Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. If you have these 2 cards set up in your hand, you should have enough of the search power to go into. What you'll do is you'll summon out your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy, adding to your hand your Spellbook of the Master. With this play, after this card was activating, you want to remember you have to activate this card first to resolve your spellbook cards that you use, but after you get your search for your Spellbook of the Master, you can then go for the additional search of activating your Spellbook of Secrets to search out your Spellbook of Judgment and add it to your hand. And then with that, you can then go for the additional search play of having the additional spells in your hand for the reveal, activating your Spellbook of the Master, revealing your Spellbook of Judgment in your hand, copying the name of the Spellbook of Secrets in the graveyard to add 1 additional spellbook card to your hand to use, which could be your Spellbook of Knowledge, and then you'll just have the 2 in the graveyard. You can activate the Spellbook of Judgment now, and then after that, you'll have each one of your spells to go for. You can then activate Spellbook of Knowledge. Depending on what you draw off of this card will also be vital for the search and setup. So then you can either go for the additional Spellbook search and play setup. If you have the Spellbook of Life off your draw, then as long as you have the other Spellbook monster to banish from your graveyard and reveal one other one in your hand for the special summon of another one in your graveyard to use. Or you can even go for more of the search power, activating more depending on what you open up in your hand to use. You can have the Spellbook Tower activated, ready to go, or even then the better search will come down to what you add in your hand to use because of these cards. It all will just activate depending on what you get, but even just with the 1 search off of the activation of Spellbook of Knowledge will get you the search for 1 Spellbook card to your hand, which can be one of the Spellbook of Fate, and then having the 1 activated card can at least get you an effect veiler on the field as a spellcaster monster. If you have the Spellbook of Judgment search in your hand ready to go already, and then you have the additional search in your hand, if this is the first card in your hand, and then you also have the Spellbook Magician of Prophecy and the 1 additional Spellbook of Secrets and 1 additional Spellbook card in your hand, what you can do is you can activate the Spellbook of Judgment. So as the first activation, normal summon out your Spellbook Magician of Prophecy. Depending on what other Spellbook card you have in your hand, you can search out for the other vital one to use. Let's say Spellbook of the Master, activating your secrets once again to gain you 1 additional search, so you can go for the Spellbook of Fate. And with that, you can use Spellbook of the Master, revealing the Spellbook of Knowledge in your hand, copying the secrets, getting you 1 additional spell in your hand to use. You can add the Spellbook of Eternity because you will be banishing cards off the Spellbook of Fate ready to have. So then that is your second spell in the graveyard. You can then activate Spellbook of Knowledge, sending the Spellbook Magician to the grave. With that, you can get 2 more draws. And once again, the draws will be random for the knowledge, but depending on what you open up, it can either be the field spell search or even another searcher for you to have later on. And then after that, you can have your 3 spells activated at the end of the turn thanks to the Spellbook of Judgment and the Spellbook Magician in the graveyard, having your 2 cards set. You can then set your Spellbook of Fate on the field. Remember, you do have to control a spellcaster type monster to activate this, but that will be fine because at the end of the turn, Spellbook of Judgment will activate. You'll have your search that you already have from the draw 2 and the search off of the Spellbook of the Master. You will then be able to add 3 additional Spellbook cards of different names from your deck to your hand. So not only have you replenished your hand, but since you activated 3 spells, you can get the special summon of Jowgen since you had 3 for that level on the field, locking your opponent out of special summoning and having a way to at least stop the 1 monster they may try to swing over your monster on the field also. But that is it for the deck profile. I hope you all enjoyed this. Definitely an awesome deck. And like I said, it's been so long since we've had Spellbook of Judgment off the ban list. I definitely can't wait to start playing this deck even more now because of it. And as always, until next time, please don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And Kira, Twig out.